everybody in India. We are going to start our webinar, another Thursday webinar. For the Thursday webinar, this is the first time we're having a webinar in the morning. Usually our webinars are at 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday evening, but today we're having it at 10:30 a.m. And the only reason we're doing that is because we have an esteemed panel with us, and a couple of our speakers are joining us from India. And we also have an audience that is going to join us from India. And I think like to start off by welcoming our keynote speaker, Ms. Apurva Srivastava, the Consul General of India. So thank you, Apurva ji, for making the time for us. I'd like to also thank Pramod ji for joining us, the President of ICCC. Pramod ji, was not feeling very well, but he's actually got himself up and fit for today's webinar. We also have Dr. Vishwamohan Bansal, the chairperson of the Education Committee at the PhD CCI. We also have Dr. Prachi Kaul, Director, Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute from Calgary. And we have our very own Prashant Srivastava, Director, South Asia for Seneca College. We also have, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Ranjit Mehta. Dr. Ranjit Mehta would not be speaking, but I'd like to acknowledge his presence. And thank you very much, Dr. Ranjit, for assisting us in a lot of the things that we do, especially in India and wherever PhDCC is involved. Without further ado, we will move on to what we will be talking to today. What is I think most of us know about the National Education Policy, the NEP that was announced. There's going to be radical transformation school and higher education, and the NEP aims to reform all aspects of the educational sector. So, one of the key aspects that we talked about, I think here is, there's going to be people talked about, Princeton, Mumbai, or Harvard, Hyderabad. So a lot of these global institutions now possibly can open shop in India, right? Given the fact that Indian students, possibly the whole brain drain thing that happened can possibly convert into a brain gain where we can bring the institutions of knowledge to India, right? So that is, I think, one of the key things that we would like to talk about, and what is the impact for that on a Canada-India basis as well. So on the Canada-India corridor, those of you might already know that Canada is the recipient of more than 100,000 Indian students every year. So what impact on that some of these things are going to have on that flows? That's something that we would like to talk about as well. We also want to talk about, within India, how it's going to make an impact, maybe in the short term, in the long term, medium term, in terms of Indian competitive advantage, into the competitiveness of the Indian economy as well, and those different things. So I think it is going to be quite an exciting session. So we will start off first with the keynote address from Apurva ji, and then we will move to Pramod ji, and then last but not least, we want all of you listening on Facebook and watching us live to send us your questions. We will take your questions, put them on to our panelists, and we have our own Sharma ji, Surinder Sharma, the Vice President of ICCC, that will be taking those questions and putting them to the panel. Before we go further, I just want to talk about the ICCC Small Business Assist Program. This is a program that the ICCC started to help small businesses, especially during COVID. If you're a small business doing business in the Indo-Canada corridor, send an email to icconline.org and just say Small Business Assist Program. And then one of our members, and we have a lot of professionals and subject matter experts, and we will assign somebody for free to assist for a free 30-minute phone consultation. So please take us up on this. I would like to see, us helping out. We've already helped many small businesses, but if you're a small business wanting help, please reach out to us. Again, a disclaimer: anything, views expressed speakers are their own personal opinion, do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of ICCC. So, without further ado, Apurva ji, over to you. We'd like to, hear a few words from you about the new education policy, and also being, the Consul General in Toronto. You've been seeing a lot of Indian students come in. I think they're a big, part of your constituency. How do you see all this changing, given all these changes? Few insights from you on that. Over to you, Apurva ji.
Thank you so much. First of all, good evening to people in India and good morning to people in Canada. At the outset, I want to thank the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce for organizing this wonderful webinar. And a lot of changes have been happening in India, and this is one of the most important changes. The last education policy was framed in 1986 and modified in 1992. It was a high time that everything should keep pace with the changing India, and so is the national education policy. And the consultations have been going on for like more than 3 years with all people of all strata of society, all regions, all linguistic groups. So finally, what has come up is a wonderful document. I'm very happy to see the participation of such eminent panelists, Dr. Vishwa Mohan Bansal, Dr. Prachi Kaul, and Prashant Srivastav. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. I mean, you guys are the expert. I can just generally say about things. So basically, it was approved by the cabinet end of July, and basically it aims to enable individuals to study more specialized areas of interest at deep level, and basically to develop character, to move away from rote learning, to instill creativity, dignity of labor, and to have this 21st century capabilities across a range of disciplines. So basically, it's rooted in our local ethos and looking towards the 21st century. There are so many features which I'm sure you'll discuss in details, but it aims to universalize the pre-primary education by 2025. The existing 10+2 curriculum, which gave a lot of emphasis on rote learning and all, has been changed into 5+3+3+4 design. And the medium of instruction, at least till class 5, would be mother tongue. There's 3 languages to be learned, of which 2 should be native Indian languages. So while looking at developing the native languages, it also looks at to develop the scientific temper. It gives students increased flexibility and choice of subjects to study across arts and vocational subjects, and with multiple exit options during undergraduate degree. The National Testing Agency will conduct a common entrance exam, and most importantly, in relevance to Canada, if I can say that, it aims to promote India as a global study destination, providing premier education at affordable cost. High-performing Indian universities will be encouraged to set up campuses abroad, and the top 100 universities in the world will be facilitated to operate in India. So it does impact the India-Canada relations. Just to give a background, India and Canada are strategic partners. We are natural partners. We are both vibrant democracies, share the Commonwealth traditions, and have a similar parliamentary model, and champion a rule-based international order. And above all, we are multicultural societies, and tied by strong people-to-people ties. We have 1.6 million strong Indian diaspora, 700,000 Indian citizens living and working in Canada, and above all, in context of NEP today, 225,000 Indian students living in Canada and increasing. I mean, it's not counting the students who have already taken admission in Canada in the universities and are yet to come. So that will, substantially increase the numbers in Canada, the Indian students in Canada. And these are, and the Indian students have formed the largest number of highest percentage of international students in Canada. And they contribute to Canadian economy by bringing at least $7 billion as tuition fees alone. And our educational partnership does not stop here. There was this MOU on cooperation in higher education that was signed in 2010, and it was again renewed in 2018 during the visit of Honorable Prime Minister to India. And this MOU covers student and faculty exchange, research and curriculum development, organization of workshops and seminars, training between institutes and higher learning, mutual recognition of education qualifications, policy dialogue, among others. Of course, we have Dr. Prachi Kaul here, the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute. It promotes academic partnership. In my brief, it was written 125 institutions. That must be more now. I'll look forward to hearing from you. Then, of course, there's IC Impact, which is a Canada-India Research Center for Excellence, dedicated to development of research collaborations. It brings together researchers, industry innovators, community leaders, government agencies, and community organizations. And, they basically work together to find solutions to key challenges which faces, both our countries. It has funded 38 projects, which have yielded 32 patents. So it's, a lot of work is going on. Indian origin students, scholars, and educators have significantly contributed to the range of research institutes across Canada. I keep on visiting all the universities, and it's so heartening to see, apart from the number of Indian students, a lot of faculty is of Indian origin. So it's, and we keep on hearing the great work that they have been doing. It's always, the Vice Chancellor or the Dean always brings it to my notice that, the Indian origin people are very hardworking and they are doing great stuff. So it really makes us really proud. So, there's a lot of cooperation which is already going on, and I'm sure this new education policy will brings more possibilities of cooperation. So I look forward to, hearing all of you today. I might have to leave a little early, but I'll definitely see the recording. I would request you to, give us concrete suggestions on what can we do at our level to enhance this cooperation, and how the new education policy can help in, further strengthening our bilateral relations, especially in the field of education. So all those suggestions will be highly welcome, because such an esteemed panel, you have experience of working both in India and Canada. So I look forward for those suggestions, and I would like to, start implementing them with your support. So I'm very hopeful that this new policy structure will position India as an emerging powerhouse for education, and will further opportunities for strengthening cooperation between our two countries. I really wish this webinar my best of luck, and I hope to have real good suggestions which we all can follow up together to further strengthen our relations. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Apurva ji. Really appreciate your insight, and also, you kind of wanting us to come up with something concrete. So that is great. I mean, I think, action items, or we need to, go have something that we can execute on. I think that is fantastic. And I think, we will definitely, I think to the panel as well, that's something that I think we need to look for, and maybe we need to have a couple of points at the end of this. So thank you, Apurva ji, and please, stay for as long as you can, and then, we will send you the recording. Yeah. So now we will move to the next section, which is we will have Pramod ji on board. Pramod Goyal is the president and CEO of Canada-wide Financial Corporation, also the president and board chair of the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And so over to you, Pramod ji, so that you can have a question and answer session with our panel.
Thank you, Vijay. Good morning and good evening once again to all the panelists and my colleagues on the board. I would also extend a very special welcome and sincere gratitude to Mrs. Apurva Srivastava, the Consul General of India in Toronto, for providing her perspective to this National Education Policy 2020 webinar hosted by ICCC this morning. I would also extend a warm welcome to my dear friend, Dr. Ranjit Mehta, the Principal Director from PhD CCI from New Delhi. Thank you, sir, for taking the time and being with us this evening. So let me begin this interaction by asking a simple question to our panelist, Dr. Vishwa Mohan Bansal, who has also joined us from New Delhi. Dr. Bansal, in your opinion, what are the key features of the new policy that will enable India to become a knowledge superpower? If you can kindly share some light on that.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much, Pramodji, for giving me this opportunity. I think, Apurva ma'am has touched these points in her opening remarks. You would see that for the last, say, since 60s or 70s, we have been working out a new education policy to keep pace with the changing times. And there have been various committees. I met the former cabinet secretary, Subramaniam also was earlier heading this committee. Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who headed the current committee, had 3 one-to-one meetings with him. He came to my college, New Delhi Institute of Management, and spent 3 hours with us. And in his recommendation, he has recorded my conversation and discussion with him. So intention behind the new policy of the government has been very progressive, very, very progressive. Although they have been, varied interests, as you always know, because education itself is such a huge requirement and a huge, huge sector in India in view of its population. And also in view of the fact that Indian students have been going to UK, Europe, Canada, Australia, USA in very large numbers. So there has been a thinking that why can't we provide similar environment, similar education, and similar opportunities to these students who have to travel overseas? Why can't we provide these things in India at a much lesser affordable cost? Not compromising on the quality of learning or education, but obviously the cost becomes a factor. And you also save a lot of money while traveling or while living in other destinations. That was one prime reason that we need to uplift our education standards and levels to what the world is looking for. Number 2, since I've myself been a career bureaucrat, served the government of India for long 36 years. So I know what goes behind the minds of the government. The other main thing is that till now, if we say that finest institutions across the world are located outside India, if we think by that, if we go by that feeling, so that education or that exposure was right now restricted to very small percentage of Indian students. So intention of the government is how we bring that closer to every home and every town and every city of the country. So these are the 2 prime reasons. I would like to come back to the discussion whenever Pramodji says not taking time beyond that, but these are the 2 prime considerations. And obviously, one has to be having a lot of cultural learnings from each other. But once we open up centers in India and once we open up centers overseas, it's not going to be as I see as a now an educationist, earlier bureaucrat, as I see, it's not going to be one-way traffic. It is going to, Indian institutions would certainly give their best when they partner with institutions overseas. And it's going to be a mutual learning which will suit both the countries, especially Canada. because the skill requirements of both the countries are almost similar and very huge. Indian population in Canada is very, very high. So we are in a way, very close to each other culturally. And let us now be close educationally also. That seems to be the purpose, so that we don't have to really go to Canada every day. Why can't Canada be coming to India? So that's the focus.
Thank you, Dr. Bansal. I think one of the key features, as you also mentioned, is a significant, perspective of this announcement of the new policy is pertaining to the internationalization of higher education, the exchange of universities. So, new policy, as it states, will encourage the world's top educational institutions to launch operations in India, and would also encourage the top Indian universities to branch out abroad. Now, well, this is auditory indeed. And there are two specific concerns that I could think of. Will the presence of global brands affect the enrollment in Indian institutions? And the other concern, of course, is the money aspect. The presence of global brands might take the fee sky high. So, Dr. Paul, if I would like you to join in on this. So, you have since done a short paper on the new policy. How would you address these concerns specifically? I think you're on mute, Dr. Paul.
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for bringing me into this discussion. This is, I would say, it's a challenging task. As we all know, this is the new policy, and that has this component of international, encouraging international bodies or international universities of standards to but it's just not going to be easy task. But I think people are worldwide motivated enough to land to India, and there have been a lot of requests. Not these are not recent requests. If I can remember very well, when I was doing my research in the year 2004 and 5, at that time as well, we have had many universities coming in, and as an effect, in the year 2013, I think. Then Government of India proposed a bill to have universities setting up campuses in India, but the bill was not accepted because of the many threats involved. So for us to see that this is a great possibility to explore international players and bringing them in to India, and as well as taking our institutions abroad, is going to be a very interesting exercise. On paper, of course, it sounds very good, but when it's a matter of implementation, it is a great challenge, because there are going to be nuances involved. As we all say, SWOT analysis is very, very important while we are implementing it, because everything is going to have a pros and cons. So challenges are going to be there, and as you rightly said, that fee is going to be one issue, and the governing structure is going to be the issue. The recruitment is going to be the issue. Issue is also going to be how and what India is going out of it, while we are inviting them to be having campuses. Regulation of fees, while NPE, National Educational Policy, new policy, talks about governing the fee structure in terms of equalizing it and not making it too high or too low for a couple of institutions. In that scenario, how we are going to deal with this foreign institutions and their fee structure is going to be a challenge for sure. But I have a feeling that that governing these particular aspects, there is going to be another, I would say, act or adjoining act coming in as to support, and that will elaborate on how these things are going to be processed and how these things are going to be, in terms of modalities involved, how these things are going to be placed well. So rules and regulations are yet to be formed. I don't think Ministry of Education have led it across as a final version, but they are working on it, because we all were, and that was wonderful exercise to be involved with Government of India while they were drafting this policy. They sought opinions and reflections were taken from other bodies like Shastri Institute as well while we were drafting the international component of it. So I think the whole exercise is still remaining there for the officials to understand how they are going to build this up, especially the international component of this policy. I would also like to, as Apurvaji was saying, that there are going to be discussions, but she would like to understand what is the way forward and how we can expedite it. My opinion here is that we have to integrate all the players, all the major stakeholders have to join hands in making it possible to implement it. There are wonderful programs that are already in place to promote internationalization. And these are great programs like Spark program or Gyan program, which enables Canadian faculty to come down to India, and as well as promotes younger lot of researchers to visit India or to Canada. So I think these are the program, or a study in India program for that matter. Why not to club these programs and find a way where an assimilation of qualities is possible, integrating what is being stated in the new education policy, but also deriving the facts and the essence of other programs that are already in existence on international corridor, especially when I talk about this binational corridor. Of course, there have been a lot of great work happening through Government of India's bodies like Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute or IC Impact or MyTax. We have been collaborating on. So I think there are going to be challenges, but there is a will to deal with those challenges and coming forward in a very positive manner.
Thank you, Dr. Kaul. And since you mentioned about the internationalization of education, which will see substantive collaboration between Indian and global educational institutions, I would like to bring Prashant here. And Prashant, you've spearheaded the international recruitment at Seneca for Southeast region for a while now. So how do you foresee this taking shape once the proposed policy is implemented?
Yeah. Thank you, Pramodji, and it's a pleasure to be part of such an esteemed panel with Dr. Kaul and Dr. Bansal. So first of all, national education policy itself aims to bring revolutionary changes to Indian education system. So it was like much awaited. It took 34 years for the government to come with this policy, and then this policy is different than what it was before, which was a national policy on education. So the very important part of this policy is it focuses on quality of education. So research, and vocational education, these are integral part of this policy. And I think here, when it comes to international institutes and universities, what you have mentioned in the paper also, they excel and they have expertise in it. And the whole policy framework, it brings Indian education system closer to the Western education system. So wherein the collaborations can happen. So, I've been working in this field for almost 15 years now, and most challenging, both from university perspective and college perspective, we face challenges when it comes to synergizing the education, how we can collaborate. But with the multiple exit and entry points and with the credit-based system now being introduced in the Indian education system, there will be possibilities of twinning arrangement, which we faced a lot of challenges, roadblock, because educators in the Western countries, in US and Canada, couldn't articulate and map the curriculum. They faced a lot of challenges, but introduction with the multiple exit and entry point, introducing certificate, diploma, then degree, and then a research-based degree into the degree program itself would include it would entail the collaborative reach of Indian institution. At the same time, now it will bring Indian institution also to improve, to improvise, and be globally competitive as well, because government encourages top Indian institutions to become global, to go outside of India and set up those campuses. And likewise, yes, there is an invitation for foreign universities also to come and set up campuses. However, that will require a legislative framework to be set up. The bill has to be passed in the parliament, and based on what I have read from papers, government is will go gradually because the Indian education system is diverse. It is not uniform. So because we have states also into they have a role play in the education space as well. So what I feel personally, like what the policy changes have been recommended, the implementation will take at least 3 to 4 years. And if you just see the numbers, how many students are enrolled in the Indian education system, there are over 37 million students enrolled in higher education in India. It is more than the population of Canada, actually. And if you see the how much potential it has for people who have desire to seek education, 500 millions are in the age of 5 to 24. So you can see the demand of education. That is a reason why there will be a very important role play of foreign institutions, quality institutions to come and collaborate in this space. So I would say that, like, if you want to ask my view on the recruitment, will it improve recruitment of Indian students coming to Canada? It may not impact at the present time when the policy has come. It may take 3 to 4 years. So when the policy is being implemented, then we will see how this will happen. So it will all depend how the policy is being implemented. And as Dr. Prachi rightly said, there are pros and cons, there are challenges, and once they are evaluated, I think that will present good opportunity. But definitely, like it is a very good policy and much awaited. 34 years, India waited for reforms in the education sector. It was much neglected, actually. So fortunately, we have such a good policy which has ambition to double the gross enrollment ratio, and then you see the GDP contribution that also is proposed to be increased. So in all sense, it is a good policy, especially for the vocational sector, because I come from the college sector. So we have this experience of building this college system in Ontario with Ontario College System. And I think this can also play a good role in synergizing collaboration in the Indian education system, because what emphasis government is giving to vocational education, that they're going to increase the number of students in vocational education to more than 50% by 2025. So there is a big opportunity for both vocational and research institutes to participate and collaborate in the Indian education system. Thank you.
Thanks, Prashant. Dr. Kaul, I mean, taking a clue from what Prashant just mentioned, so the other interesting aspect of the policy is the crucial connection between technology and education. So, but apparently, as far as I've taken a brief read about the policy, it doesn't go far enough in working to foster the technological capabilities. So what would be your take on that?
Thank you, Pramodji. I think they are building it up. You know, it's not so that it's in total absentia that they have introduced this scheme. MHRD has a component by which they are focusing on technology-enabled education. And in the current time, when we see that it's a difficult time of pandemic wherein technology is embedded in the education, we have very quickly adopted to it. Very recently, All India Indian Association of Universities, AIU, All India Association of Universities, and one of the private universities have come together to develop a toolkit for teachers, you know, to develop the new pedagogy. And I think they are gearing up very well in terms of providing this. And as I said earlier, for all sphere of education, it is very important that we integrate different programs. Standalone programs may not be successful. But I would like to mention here the wonderful programming that was introduced way back, I think 2000, in between 2010 to 2015. And MOOCs, these are the online platform, Swayam Prabha, all these are programs that facilitates online education. It's a depository of, courses wherein you can log in, and many are, courses that are taught by one of the best faculties in the world. So what I mean to say that they have worked upon this component as well. and they are gradually picking it up very well. And I see a great scope of India emerging as a knowledge hub in terms of technology-enabled pedagogy. So I see it as a very positive note from this side. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. Now, myself being a finance person, so let me slightly change the position and look at the financial aspect. So, and the question I would take it to Dr. Bansal. So I understand the new policy promises to allocate about 6% of the GDP towards education. And so the question is, how realistic is that number, considering that traditionally, when we look at for last several decades, if my memory serves me right, so the allocation has been between 2 and 4%. So this is probably the first time that we're aiming for a significant increase. So how realistic is that number? Dr. Bansal.
No, it's a pleasure. Since I said, since I've been a part of both the government and now, into the education sector, I'll just tell you something very simple, and I'm sure, Ms. Apurva would, agree with it entirely. These are the goals or the objectives or the plans set by the government of India. It is like Constitution of India that we need to be like, principles of, moving forward. So this is our direction in the long run. How soon and how best we can hit all the targets, that is to be seen. But at least, one is very hopeful that government has come out with a document which is very progressive and giving tremendous hope. Obviously, like Canada, Indian system is such a big democracy. So like Mr. Pramod, all the political parties and all the political leaders and all the teachers and all the institutions are in the coming years going to question the government, where is the 6%? So since it's a being open system, government has set its goal and its intentions very, very clear. And we should be very hopeful. Yes, it's a matter of time. At times, certain priorities arise on Indian frontiers or so many things, or COVID-like situations happen. But yes, the goal is very progressive and very, very hopeful goal the government has given.
Thank you, Dr. Bansal. I hope that works, and in the shorter run, we see significant changes coming in. Prashant, I mean, the next question that I would ask you is how it may affect the new policy when it mentions about vernacular languages. So the Canadian institutions might have some difficulty because of this new policy requirements. Of course, I mean, there is no doubt that there are great returns in promoting local languages. And according to FICCI, promoting local languages on digital platforms will result in a gain of about 200 million additional internet users. So, but if you look at slightly in Canada, we've seen international students coming in from India, though they study in English medium schools, but they still struggle with some of the language requirements. So how will this emphasis on local languages affect the quality of students coming to Canada in near future or once the policy gets implemented? Do you foresee a decline in the numbers from that perspective?
Well, like with the language of proposed in NEP, I think that the proposal is to make learning more smoother and better for students because because it's like by research it is proved that if students they study their native language in the mother tongue, the outcomes are more good for that. But having said that, like when it comes to students coming to studying in Canada, where the language of instruction primarily is English, and in some provinces it's French. So the proficiency level of language do matter. And actually, like even students when they pass the exam, like like in Indian system we had more emphasis on passing the exam, but there is a structural change in this policy wherein it's more about participation, it's more about outcome based learning. So I feel like if the policy is in the spirit in which it is has been framed, the outcome actually, because even then when students will move away from exam based learning to more like applied learning and more learning by doing, that will enhance the outcome level. And gradually when they will also do a course, because most of the students they have to clear IELTS or TOEFL exam when they apply to Canadian universities. I feel that by when the students are foundationally groomed based on what the recommendations are in the policy, we will have positive outcome. Because if you see foundationally, even in early childhood education, the government has included also in the formal sector of education. So overall, it is going to build a better educated person, I would say, that through the policy implementation. So I don't see that as an immediate challenge, because students have to pass those standardized tests to come to Canada or to the US to study IELTS or TOEFL.
Okay, fair enough. Now, one other significant emphasis on the new policy is to provide equal opportunity for all. I think, as you mentioned, Prashant, it is going to be based on experiential learning, promotion of multilingualism, and also it is going to be focusing on development of cognitive skills in the individuals, such as critical thinking and problem solving. So, Dr. Bansal, if I may ask you, so this would require a lot of, I think, a huge number of qualified teachers in the faculty to be able to impart this kind of a training related to what we have seen in the Indian education system. So, how are we going to address that issue in this new policy?
The problems, as you know, are gigantic. Let's be very honest. And unless we are very honest, we'll never reach the solution. So, in fact, I must say as of now, the regulatory bodies, they started calling them as facilitators, but they're regulators. So they have in the last couple of years come up with very large number of teacher training programs, both at school level, at higher education level. And as Prachi ji mentioned about MOOCs and other things, several things have come up. But here, if I don't know whether I should be so straight or so honest or blunt. This is one aspect which has always bothered me. Fortunately, I have not been a part of the academic system through my career. Otherwise, I would have said everything is very, very good over here. So since I was on the other side through my entire innings, and when I came to real education, because NDM was set up by my father, he was a freedom fighter. He and several judges of the Supreme Court, they set it up in '92 as their payback to the nation, because they had seen best of everything in the world. So they said, Indian education needs some input from us. And that is what one has been trying to carry forward with. And because of our being very straight and very direct, it will be difficult for you to believe that Union Cabinet Minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, as Minister for Civil Aviation or Railways or Commerce or Industries, he came to my board meetings at board directors for 5 years and sat with me to steer the board meetings of the college. But ultimately, now coming to your question, I feel this is one big pain area. And the more and more and more we do, it is still going to be less and less and less. Because, like a parent grooming a small child, really good teachers, good at what exactly they want to deliver, is extremely essential for the success of any education system, be it in India, be it in Canada, be it anywhere. So there we need to be making lot of effort there.
Sure, Dr. Bansal, and I agree 100%. I mean, when we have these kind of larger initiatives, time, of course, would be some concern, and we will have teething problems initially. But I think looking at the overall picture and where we are going strategically.
And Pramodji, one thing, if you allow me to speak here, because what is happening is, I'm sure Prachi ji and everybody would agree, possibly if such kind of recommendations come from ICCC
Mhm.
or from our high commissioners based in other countries, I'm saying what kind of recommendations, because otherwise things may continue to be like that. So what is happening is, I have been on behalf of the PhD Chamber of Commerce, since that's a big platform available to me and to all my colleagues. As chairman of the Education Committee, I have been telling the government of India, of course, all relations are there, but still now you're speaking on behalf of the chamber. I've been telling that industry must come in a very big way. Take the lead even as a teacher. Okay. In fact, I went to the extent, and if you see the representations or the discussions which I had with the chairman of the new education policy, I said ultimate evaluator could be an industrialist. You teach and the industry chamber should decide whether I'm doing right job or not. Because ultimately my skill set or my skill learning has to be examined, evaluated and audited by you, not by teacher. So that revolution I have been pleading for, but I do not know whether it will come and when will it come. Number one. And here itself, in fact, I told the HRD minister at one platform which I was co-chairing with him. I said, in our country, our prime minister may be the best face or the best known leader across the world. But if he decides to come to the academia, he will be appointed only as an assistant professor by my UGC and the ICTE, because he doesn't have a PhD of 10 or 15 or 20 years old PhD with him. Okay, so we continue to suffer from these infirmities, and for which I don't mind to be very vocal here. In case foreign institutions like you come and write to the education industry or to the PMO, we need to open up that CMT, CEOs of companies, if they want to come, either they'll come as visiting professor or they come as assistant professor. This is a very, very sad thing. They can't even come as a full professor in Indian institutions. That's what it is.
Thank you, Dr. Bansal, for those comments, and I cannot more than agree on what you just said, for sure. Since I'm just trying to be conscious of time, I think we're already running behind. We have to entertain some questions from the audience. Just, Mr. Sharma, before I pass on the floor to you, I would request Dr. Mehta, if you want to just have a comment, if you like to, since you are here listening to our discussion on behalf of PhD CCI or in your own personal capacity. Dr. Mehta.
Thank you, Mr. Goel. First of all, I thank you very much for inviting Dr. Bansal here, the chairman of our education committee. He himself is an educationist and runs a very, very reputed institution in India. He has given his views, and I would just say that this partnership, between PhD CCI and ICCC, we had signed MOU, and we are going to do a lot of such programs. And this is the result of, right now we are joining through this webinar, is the result of this pandemic. I think this is something good that we have taken from the pandemic. We should see it in a positive way. And as far as our new education policy is concerned, then this is definitely going to be transformational. And whatever discussion I heard, by the expert panel here, it was very enriching, and we look forward to have more such discussions in the times to come. And thank you very much indeed, Mr. Goyal, for inviting us here. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. And I would like Mr. Sharma to please take up questions from the audience. And if we have time later on, then we might take one or two questions more later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pramodji. I have a first question, which is coming from one of our past presidents of Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, Rakesh Goenka. And the question is for Dr. Bansal. There are over 100,000 students coming from India into Canada, and also large numbers go to other countries like Australia and all over the world. And with this new policy, with the better infrastructure to be built, is there any possibility that these students who come at a very early age and they're immature, and the type of incidents we see here happening in Canada sometimes is very sad, can the same students be given better education back in home and they can be equipped as better citizens as Indians? Is there going to be any change?
Mr. Surendra, thank you for a very important question, because that is what is at the back of mind in the education policy. That is the basic premise, one of the premises I mentioned at the beginning, that should happen. Now, again, since I would like to be very straight, I see that happening not in the short run, and I don't see it happening possibly even in the midterm. It would certainly happen in the long run, because what I see is 2-3 things. Unless that foreign institution, maybe Canadian institutions, when they come to India, this is my request, and ICC should kindly take up with the institutions in Canada. They just don't have to replicate what they're doing in Canada. They have to be doing something better than that. And they have to come up with those skill sets which ultimately would be grooming Indian students for great jobs or entrepreneurs in India and also in Canada. They should not feel that if I'm studying in India, I may not get a job in Canada. Because as you know, currently, a lot of Indian students go to Canada primarily to ultimately settle down there. True. Or to find jobs over there. That's one reason, because the standard of living or the way of life and all the things are, non-comparable, I would say, as of now. So that hope has to be generated that if you carry a degree from Canadian institution in India, you will be still eligible for the same facilities and same opportunities if you want to study at that institution in Canada. That's number one. Number two is that, again, I'm talking the Canadian institutions, because I would be very keen, I'll be very keen in case institutions come to India and we improve the things. Number two is that Canadian they need to be Canadian business organizations in India. They need to be working a bit on their branding, on their visibility in India. As of now, several, British or several American or Japanese, those brands and those companies are, household names in India. So that feeling has also to come that, education institution in Canada have to work on the business organizations working in India for giving them that bigger push. That's what I would like to say here.
Thank you. Thank you. My next question is for Prashant. Actually, going post-COVID, most of the Canadian colleges, they have increased their fees close to 10% in the coming semesters. And this is going to affect a lot of Indian students who have come here, and they're already facing so much hardships, and most of the teaching will be online. So I'd like to ask whether the local government is going to address this issue, or is there going to be any concessions to these Indian students who are already facing a lot of hardships?
So, in general sense, Mr. Sharma, like Canadian government has announced measures which has benefited international students, like CERB was announced, emergency relief benefit. Students were able to get $2,000 if they have worked in the previous years, as well as Canadian institutions also announced their relief measures with COVID-19. For example, in Seneca, we distributed over $2 million, like to both domestic and international students when it came to COVID-19. The increase of fees, I would say that it would depend on institution to institution, because in Canada, the government doesn't regulate the fees. It is regulated by institution to institution. So there is no centralized mechanism in Canada to from the government point of view, where government plays a regulatory role to regulate the fee, the tuition fees. Plus, also I would like to add here that education in Canada is a provincial jurisdiction. There is no federal, there is no central Ministry of Education in Canada. So, so in terms of the tuition fees, it will be on each institution. When it came to COVID-19, any of the institutions, not only in Canada, but across the world, in India also, they have moved their learning from face-to-face to online learning, which is a response to COVID-19, that students are able to continue their education without break. So going back to online education in the era of COVID-19, it is helping students with continuity of education. In sense, when it comes to international students, if they are in India, the government of Canada has also announced support measures when it comes to their postgraduate work permit, that students can start their studies in India. They can be at home, stay safe, and they will still get the benefit of postgrad work permit if they complete 50% of their program in Canada when the situation calms down with respect to COVID-19. Also, when they're in home, they are not paying for tuition fees, they're not paying for meals, they're not paying for the travel expense. So in a way, staying home is also a cost saving measure. And when it comes to institution, I can tell you about Seneca. We have reduced portion of fees, what we were charging for recreational fees, and a few administrative fees have been reduced, and it has been reduced by many of the institutions. So overall, in the era of COVID-19, if a student is studying from their home countries and they're pursuing Canadian education, there is measures by government, by institutions, wherein they have cost saving benefits as well as continuity in their education. So this is exactly what we are trying to emphasize. Actually, we are doing webinar at our end also, and engaging with students on one-to-one basis, actually helping them out with the differences when it comes to time zone as well. So this is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is, maybe Dr. Bansal may like to take it up. Basically, the education policy has to be such balance between academic excellence and also character development and human values, so that what we are seeing last few days, actually sitting in Canada, what's happening in India between CBI and Bombay Police, and I mean, we see a lot of, I mean, the moral values of the country is on the decline. So what is really being done into the education system so that it is not only just knowledge based, but it should develop the child in the early age, like when they are between the age of 5 to 12, to learn how to practice human values and have a better character building so that they become, when they grow up, they become better citizens of the country. So we don't see any emphasis being given in the education policy that how the morale of the country and the character of the country can be built.
No, you know, Srinjit, what you're saying is very, very right. In fact, you know, I always say that first 5 years or first 10 years or first 15 years are most crucial for the character building of a child. And the biggest role there is played, first of all, by the parents.
True.
Unfortunately, grandparents are not most of the time staying with you. So it comes on the parents. That is the advantage perhaps you people and we people had. And thereafter on the primary school or the middle school teacher. You know, that if the child is not guided into the right direction at that stage, so everything is lost. But I must say, if you see that, you know, the reforms that the new education policy has brought out or has suggested at the school level, at the 8th level, at the 10th level, this part has been adequately attended to. Okay, so this has been at the back of the government's mind, and this part is based on that, you know, a lot of curriculum changes are going to happen. And as I mentioned earlier, this is going to take some time. You know, if I don't see the rot has set in, but yes, if we have to change a different path, if we have to get into a different direction, we have to get into a different, you know, destination, it will take time. But I must say that this education policy, because why it took so much of time, it was framed, then again, every time it was thrown open to the institution and the public. Every time several lakh recommendations and suggestions came. The ones that you mentioned also formed a very prominent part of it. And they have been addressed to the maximum extent that's possible. So what is as of now quite hopeful. But, you know, all of us would agree, Prashantji would agree, everybody would agree, that's big role here, which I touched earlier, is on the teacher training. If the teacher is trained in that direction, things would change. So that you know, responsibility in any case would lie on the shoulder of teacher. Education policy has certainly tried to address in a very big way.
Okay, thank you. I recall that when Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi was the education minister, I think he tried to change even the name of the ministry to human development, human resources.
Yeah.
And now again they have brought it back to education ministry.
Yeah.
And I think he introduced these programs also. I recall that time. But I think the focus has been lost now recently, and the way things are going. So I think definitely they have to put more emphasis on that.
That's right, yeah.
So next question is, what we understand up to grade 6, the medium of instruction will be the mother tongue. And the mother tongue changes every 100 kilometers you travel in India, the mother tongue changes. So that means the country will be more in the early stage bifurcated with too many languages, and rather than at the early stage they learn common languages which could integrate the country. That's also one issue. I don't know why they have to keep for 6 years, and then if a child starts learning English has become actually a universal language at this stage for higher education. So if they'll start learning the basics of English when they reach grade 7, and then if you talk of public schools and other well-to-do schools, the children will be learning English at the early stage. So when it comes to competition into the universities and international sphere, the children who will be coming from more influential and well-to-do families, they'll be progressing more, but the children who are not financially at a higher level and will not be getting that kind of support will be left behind. I think they should equip all the children equally to reach the international standards and face competition across. What do you feel about that?
It's for me. Is it for me?
Anybody can answer.
No. I'm open, but anybody else can also take it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think.
No. This.
Prachi.
Please go ahead, Prachi. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sundarji, thanks for your observation, but I would politely like to say here that this particular, multilingualism that this policy has mentioned has is a kind of a very positive feature. And why it is scientifically proven that in those constructive years of your life, if you are introduced to as many languages, your mind sharpens to adopt other things with more receptivity. So I think it's something that will be very, very beneficial in long term. And I have my personal experience to share with you. My daughter, who goes to a school called Mirambika in Delhi, I mean, she was not even introduced to any alphabet till she was 7 or 8 year old of English. She didn't know ABC. She was introduced only Sanskrit and Hindi. But right now she is 12-year-old, and I think she knows better English than me. So it's a premise that maybe we have in mind. This is a fear that maybe if not introduced at very early stage, we may lose on English language, which is not right, because I have experienced it by myself, and I strongly believe that this component is going to bring in a lot goodness in the next generation that is going to come in.
Okay, I mean, that's your view, but just sticking to the mother tongue, which may not be really carried forward into the higher education. That's a lot of, I have read in the newspapers a lot of commentaries about this after the policy.
I agree with you. There would be opinions about it, but it is scientifically proven that if one nurtures a character in their local and their mother tongue is the language that they converse with, there are better chances of them adopting to new circumstances, new languages, new culture more nicely, and adaptivity goes higher.
Okay, I think I have got a last question which just came in. Says that many students after studying in Canada go back to India. How can India increase the acceptance of the Canadian certificates, particularly from the Canadian colleges? There's one question which has come.
That is the basic question. That is what I touched upon. That, as I mentioned, that doors of all the countries are wide open to India now. And with Canada, certainly, because, most of our people feel very close to Canada, Canadian people, and Canadian institutions. The thing is, today what the student is looking for, they are, again, I would say times have changed so fast, and perhaps the policymakers and the educationists have not been able to keep pace with the changing aspirations of the students. Their aspiration is right or wrong. They just want a degree and a job thereafter. They are not concerned what kind of a quality the degree is giving. They are not, I'm talking of about 40 to 50% students. There are 30 to 40% students very serious. Okay, they have no problem. They may work, as Prachi said, in any language, in any country, they would go to the top. There are another 30 to 40% students who says, "Main to Canada jana hai." Okay. So the thing is, they feel that Canada is the land of opportunities. Or XYZ country is the land of opportunities. And even in India, they would, from all parts of the country come to Delhi as if Delhi is the land of opportunity. So issue is, we have to, as educationists, we have to be very strict that we will give our certificate only after repeated examinations, assessments, auditing, evaluation, till we find the guy fit for a job outside. So I would say a lot of onus here. Government can't do anything over here. They have laid down an education policy. Now, we as heads of the institutions have to ensure that I will not give a degree to you till you come up to my expectation. I'll make you work onto that. I would say their onus lies in our hand. Students' expectations are very different. He wants that I should be bunking the classes, 40% I'm talking of. Okay. I will be just doing that. I get 40% marks, get a degree, and why I'm not getting a job? Then he will blame the Canadian government, the Indian government, everybody, that is a bad education policy. So the onus in a very big way, very big way, lies on the heads of the educational institutions to impart and strictly monitor the quality of education. And again, I would say very strong connect with the industry at higher education level is necessary, because we need to be knowing every minute what Dr. Ranjit is needing so that we provide that only. So I would say, before you close the event, I would just like to say one or two small things for the benefit of the ICCs and also for the Indian High Commission over there. Let us start with small things first of all. Otherwise, all these webinars will only add to your learning and my learning. Today, because all of you are Indian origin people, let us take benefit of this. Let us get the benefit of this to Indians living in Canada and Indians living in India. And that is, you identify, you may make PhD chamber as your center. We already have an MOU with us. Let us try to connect your interested institutions. They may be 2, they may be 20. You need to ascertain what exactly are they seriously looking for in India. I'm sure we at the PhD Chamber of Commerce will connect you to the right institutions. We are very keen to take lead in the right direction. We need to become, we and ICC, we should become, support and I would say conduit to connecting the two ends, so that the benefit of the education policy really reaches India and Indian students. Otherwise, what is going to happen? Possibly some other chambers from some other countries will take the lead, and we would be left behind. I'm willing to take that lead, and on behalf of the PhD Chamber of Commerce, we would be very keen to do that. Even on my own behalf at our college, we are having for last 3 years Pepperdine University of USA. 35 professors up there have been flying to our college every year for joint research. This time we did it online. So every day, we had tie-ups with Japan. We are working very closely on the skill building there under the NSDC approvals. So many things are happening in India. I would only request that let us really do it. You give 2, 3, 4 points to Dr. Ranjit ke hame ye karna hai. I promise we will do that. Let's get going. That's my only request to you.
Yeah, and also to add here to Dr. Bansal that we have a platform of more than 150 institutions across the board from India and Canada. You name a good university, you name a good institution, it is on our board. And we have experience of dealing with these expectations of these universities and institutions for over 50 years. So we are very grounded in Canada and India, as you know. We have both the offices. In India, it is the only institution that is truly binational in nature. Not even a single institution you can name which has binational structure in terms of its board as well. So it's truly binational, supported by and mandated by both the government. So we also have that strength to carry forward the agenda on behalf of Canadian universities in Canada, and also having some to understand how ground can be set perfectly, so that the hunches and the chaos that we may experience in future if it is not set on be avoided by both parties. And similarly for Indian institutions, all IITs and IISc Bangalore, they have expressed their desire that if it is allowed now, they would like to set up their small campuses abroad, satellite campuses abroad, and we would like to support it in any way as possible. I place this offer to our High Commission as well, because we are arm of Government of India in a way, dealing with their pivotal programs like Gyan and Swayam, which has been moderated in Canada through Shastri Institute. I think we can facilitate it to our level best, and it would be my pleasure to pitch in anywhere if you see the possibility of having an opinion or building up a conversation as well, or building up a dialogue on this binational corridor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I pass on to Pramodji now. I think we're short of time.
And thank you, Dr. Bansal and Dr. Kaul, for your inputs and suggestions that could lead to better coordination and collaboration in days to come. And I think on behalf of ICCC, I can assure both of you that we are also open and would be willing to explore those possibilities and work with both the institutions going forward. So thank you again very much to all of you. And I would like Vijay to take over and take the agenda forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pramodji. Thank you very much to our panel. I think it was a fantastic discussion. Lots of good comments on Facebook from our attendees as well, people, audience that were watching. Also, for Purvaji, I think we've got some points from Dr. Bansal as well as points from Dr. Kaul. Both of them have volunteered. So I'll give 10 seconds because Prashant, you probably did not get time to say what would you want to say from here to our as next steps. What could we take from here?
Thank you, Vijay. I think Prachi and Dr. Bansal has already covered most of the things. I will share what we do as part of institution when we work in India in partnerships, because we have very vibrant partnerships in India. We are training Indian nurses for last 10 years. Thousands of nurses have secured employment. They have been trained in Canada and have secured employment also through postgraduate work permit programs. We also train Indian civil servants on good governance, fintech, on different areas of public sector governance as well. So our experience.
Sorry, Prashant, just in terms of just a quick thing. What do we do from here? How do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm coming to that. So basically, it's about need analysis. What value we can add? Because if you see, the need is huge. It's humongous. The ask is really big. What we can do to add value of offering of Indian institution, and it can be in a form of technology transfer. So when we do the trade, we look into areas how the technology from the West can come to India to improvise the system. So same in the education sector, and there is a need for teacher trainings, which Dr. Bansal has mentioned, and he is already doing an amazing job in which he's bringing faculty from US, Canada, elsewhere by engaging them. So I think faculty training is one of the important area wherein Canadian institutions can have a bigger role, and shorter term training programs wherein you can upskill the Indian youth, add value to their existing offerings. So if they are doing a degree in a certain area, add it with a certain kind of certification which is more skill based, so that they become globally employable. I think these would be the couple of points. If we can look into it, that could be our next steps. So possibly we can meet in the chamber and discuss how we can take it forward. And I had a pleasure of visiting PhD CCIE in Delhi a couple of years back when we did an education forum jointly. So I remember meeting Dr. Mehta in Delhi as well. So I would say, Vijay, like these would be the steps going forward, wherein we engage, we do the need assessment, and we add value to the offering. And exactly what Dr. Bansal said, not impose like what we can offer from Canada, like not replicating the Canadian offering, adding a value to the existing Indian offering, and doing a skill match between institutions. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think those are really good points there, Prashant. And I think thank you very much again, everybody. We'd now like to get to the thank you pages for all our partners. MOU partner, PhD Chamber, Dr. Ranjit Mehta, thank you very much for getting this going. And I think as we speak, we're going to have many more of these sessions. And thanks to COVID, we're now having this virtual, but I think there is a lot of value in it being virtual and being able to be available to many more people much more easily. So I think this is one of those benefits that is going to stick. Some of the changes that came through COVID that might potentially stick even in a post-COVID world. So we really look forward to working with you. Technology partner Tangential, I'd like to thank Tangential for their assistance with putting this together. Thank our annual sponsors, Turkish Airlines, TD Bank, Peter and Paul's. Sector sponsors, RBC, TELUS, Raymond James, SBI Canada, Seneca, ICICI Bank, and media partners, Weekly Voice, Y Media, and PTC Punjabi. Also, a big thank you to all our audience. If any of you joined for the first time today, want to know anything more about today's webinar, want to know how to become a member of the ICCC, or want to take assistance from our Small Business Assist program, please write to icccc@icconline.org. With that, I'd like to thank everybody again. Have a nice evening. Good night to those of you in India, and a good day to those of you in Canada. And thank you very much, the panel. We hope to see all of you again at some point in the near future. Have a nice one. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.